and Gabby Williams were slow to get up after a collision underneath the basket. Here's what happened.
Oh, that is a major collision for the two of them. They both knock heads. It took them both some time to get to their feet.
The sound of heads colliding echoed through Gainbridge Fieldhouse like a gunshot. Lexie Hull and Gabby Williams crashed to the floor, both clutching their skulls in agony. The arena fell silent. Fans winced, cameras zoomed in, and everyone watching had the same thought. Hull's night was over. Her forehead was already swelling into a grotesque knot that looked like a tennis ball had been surgically implanted under her skin. She stumbled to the locker room, and Indiana Fever's already catastrophic injury situation had just gotten worse. But what happened next would define not just one game, but an entire team's identity. Minutes later, Hull walked back onto that court. The swelling was so severe.
Woo! First home game. Got a dub. Let's get it.
Big dub. Let's go.
Fever dub. Bow. Woo! Dubs. It's giving.
She could see it in her peripheral vision, a literal bump protruding from her head like something out of a horror movie. And what did she do? She dove headfirst for the very next loose ball, as if getting her brain scrambled was just another Tuesday at the office. That single moment of pure, unfiltered toughness would ignite the most dominant performance the Indiana Fever had put together all season. And they did it without their biggest star. This is the story of how Lexie Hull, Aaliyah Boston, Odyssey Sims, and
been most affected by all of our injuries. You know, all of the point guards that know how to get her the ball and how they get it to her. And it's not just getting her the ball, it's where you get it to her, you know, getting it to her on time, on target, you know, thinking one pass ahead, you know, all that matters. And I thought today, her aggressiveness with the ball in her hands to the rim, getting into defenders, playing low to high instead of high to low. When she plays like that, you know, there's nobody that can stop her. And, you know, she set the tone for us, really on both ends. You know, she had the NECA assignment as well and set the tone for us on both ends. And,
Kelsey Mitchell completely flipped the Fever narrative in one magical night, proving to the entire basketball world that this team is so much more than just Caitlin Clark. The nightmare scenario for Indiana had been building for weeks. Caitlin Clark, the face of the franchise and the most electrifying player in women's basketball, had been sidelined since mid-July with a groin injury that just wouldn't heal. 16 straight games without their superstar. 16 games of trying to figure out who they were when the lights were brightest and the cameras were rolling. But Clark's absence was just the beginning of their problems. Sophie Cunningham was done for the season. Ari McDonald.
A little more important in that regard, and I guess how big was it to get a win in this one?
Yeah, I mean, going into this game, we talked about that this was going to be a big game for us, considering the standings where Seattle was. But, you know, going into the West Coast trip, I mean, right now we're just going to be focused on LA. That's kind of been our motto this entire season, is just focus on the game ahead of you, be where your feet are. And so starting tomorrow, we're going to be looking at LA. But, I mean, this next string of games is definitely important for us, but we got to take it one game at a time.
Finished. Sydney Carlson, another season-ending injury. Chloe Bibby was battling knee discomfort that made every step a question mark. The Fever's guard rotation had been decimated like a small town hit by a tornado. They were down to scraps, playing with lineups that looked more like a pickup game at the local YMCA than a professional basketball team fighting for their playoff lives. The timing couldn't have been more brutal. Indiana limped into this Seattle Storm matchup, having lost 4 of their last 5 games. Watching their playoff hopes slip away like sand through their fingers. Their record sat at 19 wins and 18 losses, clinging to the 8th and final playoff spot by their fingernails. Seattle was breathing down their necks in 6th place, just 1 game ahead, but with all the momentum of a team that actually looked like they
will get the opportunity to say that they have a logo and to make the impact that she makes, not just I think in the sport, but globally, just by being who she is. She's a connector. She brings people together. And, you know, I think for us to be a part of that, and whether it's, you know, as simple as being able to celebrate all of these things with her, or, you know, as much as walking out into the arena and seeing the whiteout on the chairs out there, it's really cool. And it's really special and shoot, I'm talking about it right now and just feeling the intense gratitude for me personally, being in women's basketball, to be
in the postseason. Every single possession in this game carried the weight of their entire season. One more loss, one more collapse, and the Fever could find themselves on the outside looking in, watching other teams fight for championships while they planned their summer vacations. The pressure was suffocating, and everyone in that building knew it. But here's where the story gets interesting. This wasn't just any regular game night in Indianapolis. Nike had transformed Gainbridge Fieldhouse into a shrine to Caitlin Clark's brand power. Banners hung from every railing. Promotional shirts flooded the stands. Fans lined up around the block to take selfies with branded backdrops showcasing Clark's new logo reveal. The entire arena pulsed with the energy of a celebration, a coronation of basketball's newest cultural icon. The irony was almost too perfect to be real. There was Caitlin Clark, sitting courtside in a simple warm-up outfit, smiling and cheering, but unable to do the one thing everyone came to see her do: play basketball. The marketing machine had created this massive spectacle around her superstardom, complete with whiteout sections and enough corporate branding to make Times Square jealous. Yet the actual star of the show could only watch as her teammates fought to keep their season alive. Everyone expected Indiana to struggle. How could they not? Without Clark's outside shooting to stretch defenses, without veteran ball handlers to steady the offense in crunch time, the Fever looked like a team that would have to grind out every possession just to stay competitive. Seattle had a veteran core that knew exactly how to exploit short rotations and tired legs. This felt like the kind of game where experience would overwhelm desperation, where the Storm would slowly pull away in the fourth quarter while Indiana's depleted roster ran out of gas. Few people in that building expected anything more than a valiant effort and a moral victory. They were wrong. The collision happened so fast that most people didn't even see it coming. First quarter action. Both teams scrapping for every rebound like their lives depended on it. A loose ball bounced toward the baseline, and both Lexie Hull and Gabby Williams made the same split-second decision. Go get it at all costs. They converged on that ball like two freight trains heading for the same intersection, and the sound when their heads met was sickening. Hull went down hard, clutching her forehead as if she was trying to hold her skull together with her bare hands. Williams stayed down too, but it was Hull who captured everyone's attention as she slowly made her way to the locker room, blood beginning to show through her fingers. The cameras caught everything. The immediate swelling that made her forehead look like it belonged in a medical textbook. The way she stumbled slightly as she walked. The concerned faces of teammates who knew they couldn't afford to lose anyone else. The crowd went completely silent. This wasn't just about losing another player to injury. This was about losing the heart and soul of their defensive identity. Lexie Hull might not stuff the stat sheet like other players, but she was the one who guarded the opposing team's best perimeter scorers. She was the one diving for 50-50 balls that nobody else wanted. She was the glue that held their defensive rotations together, and now she was walking to the locker room with what looked like a serious head injury. Without Hull, Indiana's already thin rotation became paper thin. They would be even more exposed on the perimeter, even more vulnerable to quick guards who could slash to the basket or pull up for open threes. The collective thought among fans, commentators, and probably even some Indiana players was simple and terrifying. If Hull can't go, how do they possibly survive this game? But Lexie Hull had other plans. After what felt like an eternity, but was really only a few minutes, Hull came walking back down that tunnel. The swelling on her forehead had gotten worse, not better. She looked like she had been hit by a baseball bat, and yet there she was, checking back into the game with the same determined expression she always wore. The crowd began to murmur, then cheer, then absolutely erupt as they realized what they were witnessing. Hull's first possession back told everyone everything they needed to know about her character and about this Indiana Fever team. A loose ball hit the floor, and without hesitation, with a knot the size of a golf ball protruding from her skull, Hull dove on that floor like she was diving for buried treasure. She didn't think about her injury. She didn't worry about making it worse. She saw a basketball that needed to be secured, and she went and got it. The building exploded. Fans jumped to their feet, screaming and applauding not just for Hull's toughness, but for what that toughness represented. This wasn't a team that was going to roll over because they were short-handed. This wasn't a group that would use injuries as an excuse for losing. This was a squad that would fight for every possession every rebound, every win, no matter what it cost them. Hull's courage spread through the Fever lineup like electricity through a power grid. Her teammates saw her sacrifice, her willingness to put the team above her own physical well-being, and they responded by elevating their own games to levels they hadn't reached all season. What had started as a potential disaster became the defining moment that would transform their entire approach to the game. Hull finished that night with 9 rebounds and a team best plus-minus of +31, but her real contribution couldn't be measured in statistics. She had set the tone for what would become the most complete team performance Indiana had put together in months. Her toughness gave everyone else permission to be tough. Her fearlessness made everyone else fearless. And that energy would fuel what happened next. With their guard rotation decimated and Hull playing with a head injury that would have sent most people to the hospital, Indiana knew they had to completely change their approach. Everything shifted inside, and Aaliyah Boston was ready to make Seattle pay for that adjustment. Boston took over the paint like she owned it, scoring 27 points and grabbing 9 rebounds, while making life absolutely miserable for anyone who dared to challenge her in the low post. This wasn't just good basketball from Boston. This was dominance at its purest form. She established deep position on every possession, used her body to create space that Seattle's defenders couldn't contest, and finished with the kind of power that forced the Storm to send double teams that still couldn't stop her. When a player embraces the responsibility of carrying an entire offense, there's a different energy on the court, and Boston carried that load like she was born for it. The rebounding numbers told the story of complete domination. Indiana out-rebounded Seattle 42-21, a margin that's almost impossible to achieve at the professional level. Every missed shot seemed to bounce directly into Boston's hands, and those second-chance opportunities began stacking up like compound interest. Seattle's guards tried to penetrate, but they kept running into traffic. When nothing opened up from the perimeter, frustration began to show on their faces. But Boston wasn't doing it alone. Odyssey Sims, signed late in the season as an afterthought, stepped up and played like a veteran who had been waiting her entire career for this moment. 22 points of pure aggression, attacking off the dribble, pushing the ball in transition, and hitting shots that turned the arena into absolute chaos. Her signature moment came when she pulled up from the logo and drained a three-pointer that dropped through the net so perfectly it looked like it was guided by GPS. That single shot was more than just 3 points on the scoreboard. It was Sims announcing to everyone watching that this depleted Fever team wasn't going to back down from anybody. For someone who had been signed as roster depth, she looked not just comfortable, but completely fearless, and her pace and energy fueled everyone else on that court. Kelsey Mitchell provided the steady scoring that kept Seattle's defense honest, adding 21 points while making sure they couldn't just focus all their attention on Boston in the paint. Even without Clark spacing the floor with her outside shooting, Mitchell's perimeter game kept the offensive balance that Indiana desperately needed. Whenever Seattle looked like they might make a run, whenever they showed signs of cutting into the lead, Mitchell had an answer ready. The beauty of this performance was how complete it looked. This wasn't 3 individual players having good games. This was a collective identity that looked nothing like desperation and everything like dominance. Indiana controlled the pace of the game from start to finish. They turned defensive stops into fast break opportunities while limiting Seattle to just 3 fast break points the entire night. They dictated when the game would be played in the half court and when it would speed up into transition. By the final buzzer, the 95-75 victory didn't feel like an upset at all. It felt like control. It felt like a statement. Indiana had swept the season series with Seattle 3-0, climbing back into 6th place in the playoff picture, and doing it all while making one thing crystal clear. This team is so much more than just Caitlin Clark. The celebration in the locker room was everything you'd expect from a group that had just proven their toughness to themselves and the world. Players who had been written off as role players were now looking like legitimate playoff contributors. A coach who had been questioned about her rotations had found a formula that worked when it mattered most. And a franchise that had been defined entirely by one superstar had shown they could win with heart, grit, and collective determination. But even as Indiana celebrated their most impressive victory of the season, the biggest news was happening behind the scenes. For the first time since suffering her groin injury in mid-July, Caitlin Clark was back on the practice court, participating in live workouts with her teammates. The road back had been long and frustrating. 16 straight games on the sideline, watching her team fight for their playoff lives, while she could only cheer from the bench. Clark's recovery had been a step-by-step process that couldn't be rushed. First solo shooting drills, then light contact work, then more intensive conditioning. Each phase had to be completed successfully before moving to the next level, because rushing back too early from a groin injury risked setbacks that could end her season entirely. But now she was finally participating in full practice sessions, testing whether her body could handle contact, defensive pressure, and the sustained rhythm of competitive basketball. The timing pressure was immense. Indiana had just 6 games remaining in the regular season, and every day without Clark tightened their margin for error. They had climbed back into 6th place with this victory over Seattle, but the playoff race was so tight that one small losing streak could push them right back to the edge of elimination. These weren't games they could afford to waste while waiting for their superstar to get healthy. Coach Stephanie White made it clear that Clark would need multiple successful practices before they would feel comfortable activating her for game action. The medical staff wanted to see how she handled contact over 94 feet of court, whether she could sustain her performance when fatigue set in, and most importantly, whether there were any signs of regression that might indicate the injury wasn't fully healed. Many people around the team were looking at Friday's game against the Los Angeles Sparks as a potential target for Clark's return. It was against a Western Conference opponent, which meant it wouldn't directly impact their playoff positioning within the Eastern Conference. More importantly, it would give them time to reintegrate Clark into their rotation before crucial back-to-back games against teams like Phoenix and Minnesota. Clark's return wouldn't just be about her individual statistics or highlight reel plays. It would be about unlocking the full potential of a group that had just done Seattle and proved they could win with toughness and collective effort. Imagine what this team could accomplish with Clark stretching defenses and creating fast break opportunities to complement what Boston, Sims, Mitchell, and Hull had already shown they could do. The question that lingered in everyone's mind was simple, but loaded with possibilities. If this group could impose their will while short-handed and injured, what kind of ceiling do they reach when they're finally whole again? If they could dominate a playoff contending team like Seattle without their biggest weapon, what happens when that weapon returns just in time for the most important games of the season? What Indiana proved on this night went far beyond one victory in one game. They showed toughness when everything seemed stacked against them. They showed identity when they could have easily made excuses. And most importantly, they showed they could carry a fight even when their biggest star was missing from the lineup. That matters because Caitlin Clark is almost back, and when she returns to complement what this group has already proven they can accomplish, the entire playoff race might get turned completely upside down. This was the night the Indiana Fever shifted from a collection of injured role players into a legitimate playoff threat. And they did it all because one player refused to let a head injury keep her down.